It can be really hard for people to understand why someone, especially if it's a really bad toxic marriage filled with abuse, stays. It's a huge question that comes up, even when you get to court, unfortunately. And the reason for it is because I think most people are trying to keep that family together. And I think a lot of people, whether it's the father, whether it's the mother, despite what they may be going through, despite the pain they may feel, they want to do what is best for their children. And I think a lot of people grow up with the understanding of that means your family together as a unit. And so in order to make sure that their kids are getting the best future possible, they stay. And I remember in my situation just feeling as though I was constantly walking on eggshells, and my goal was to simply get through a day. To get through a day without conflict. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But it always came back to, how do I make this the best situation for my children? Another reason I think people end up staying is because, and I'm speaking specifically as a mom, a wife, and a female here, but I remember within my marriage, you wear so many different hats. You wear the mother hat, you wear the wife hat, you wear the household primary caretaker hat. And sometimes you forget to put on your own hat and make sure you're still caring for yourself. And that will lead to a situation of almost burnout. And sometimes I remember when I had kids, I wanted to be a mom so bad. And it was so much fun watching the adventure and the excitement in my children as I would take them on walks. Things as simple as an ant crawling across the road was wonder in their eyes. It was magic. And being able to see that was something that gave me so much joy. But with the stress and everything that goes on, just dealing with life, I remember one day walking with my kids through our neighborhood, and they still had that same excitement, but I felt completely empty. I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't relishing in it. I didn't have that same joy I had. I just felt missing. And that feeling was something that I said, this just isn't right. This is not how life is supposed to be. But I think when you give up so much of yourself, especially when you're in a sort of toxic relationship, it's very easy to not take care of yourself and to let yourself come last. And this isn't an selfish thing of, oh, it's me, everything is about me. It's just about taking care of yourself, because if you have a water jug and you're not constantly refilling that water, you run out of being able to give water. And the same thing happens within. And I think trying to pull yourself out of that can be incredibly difficult and incredibly fearful, because at least that is something that you're comfortable with. And the thought of leaving that and moving forward can be really, really scary. Enough so that it keeps you where you are. So it takes a lot of courage, a lot of being able to see more than where you are right now. That is an incredibly hard thing to do. So I think for those reasons, a lot of people end up staying in bad situations. In a marriage where domestic violence is at play, I think the breaking point for a lot of people was similar to what I went through. You ignore things when they're happening to you. And I remember at points thinking, I'd rather just get punched in the face than hear some of the emotional and the psychological damage that was coming to me, because at least a punch to the face, that goes away. The hurt goes away. It's easier to forget. The words, the everything that goes along with emotional trauma, that is so hard to come over. But I think a lot of people will put up with it if they think that their children are still safe. And I think a lot of times that breaking point is when you realize that it's not just you anymore. It is affecting your children. And I think that is the biggest breaking point for somebody to say, enough is enough, I need to get out. So if you're coming out of a domestic violence situation, or you have a toxic spouse, there can be a real fear for what's going to happen when you go ahead and move forward with filing, when they get served, or even how the process is going to look. And I think the most important thing, because in those moments, at that time, it is very hard to have a voice for yourself. It is very hard to suddenly go from basically the yes person, the person who is trying to keep the peace, the person who is trying to make sure that fights don't happen. It can be very hard to turn from that person to the person who then suddenly has to advocate for themselves and be able to relay what you've gone through in a way that makes sense and that a judge can understand and isn't just wrapped up in the emotions. And with that, having somebody who really understands that path, that story, and can relay that to a judge, as well as take the weight off your shoulders, provide you with the voice that you need at a time where you're going to have to rebuild how to have a voice. I think that is probably one of the most important things, is hiring an attorney who really, truly understands it. It can be really hard coming out of a situation or looking at coming out of a situation and knowing financially, this is scary. I don't have anything. I can't afford a lawyer. I can't afford living on my own. That is incredibly difficult to get over. But I'm here to tell you that things can be different. You have the capability, you have the power to be able to completely change your life. How do I know that? Because that's exactly what I did. I remember at one point where we had nothing. We were on food stamps. I couldn't afford anything. And my food was the crust of my children's peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because my priority was feeding them. I remember having to make the decision of buying my children a Halloween costume or paying the electricity bill. I bought the Halloween costume, and ironically, we came home after trick-or-treating to our lights being out. And I remember that night feeling absolutely devastated, like a failure. I failed my children. I couldn't keep the lights on in my house. So we came home and they were still excitedly counting their candy. I set up candles and then we played games. To me, for years, that was a failing moment as a mother. And my kids are all grown up now, and we've talked about this, and it's so funny to me because that is one of their best memories as a child is, Mom, remember the year we came home from trick-or-treating and we shut the lights off and we counted all our candy by candlelight? Your kids don't know your struggle if you don't show them that you're struggling. But fast forward years, when I went through my divorce, I still had nothing, but I decided to make a difference. I decided that I had the ability to change my future for myself and for my children. And I decided to become an attorney. Now that took a lot of work. This was not an easy path. You have to be prepared to go through challenges. You have to be prepared to change yourself. And that takes changing your mindset, changing your beliefs in what you are able to accomplish. All I had was a high school diploma. I didn't have money. I didn't have this background and a family who could support me through things financially. So I started back community college, undergrad, law school. I finally graduated and I continued forward and built a firm where now we are, I believe, the largest divorce and custody firm led by one single female owner. And I am very, very proud of that for a number of reasons. One, it shows other people that you can accomplish absolutely anything if you put your mind to it. I had people tell me I couldn't do it. I had people say, what are you getting yourself into? Do you know how much work that is? Yeah, it's work. But if you don't do the work, you're never going to change and you're going to stay in that situation. So if you're feeling as though your future's bleak, that how am I ever going to move forward? Just know you have the power within yourself. And I know you can do it. I've been asked so many times, what is the moment in your career that you are most proud of? And I have accomplished a lot and I'm proud of many, many things. Yet, when we go back through my journey of becoming a lawyer, I came from a divorce, had nothing but a high school diploma, worked my way through school. Now, this was incredibly challenging. I didn't have the finances. I didn't have the resources. We ended up having to move me and my 3 children to a lower income community because that's all I could afford for rent. And so my kids were in a system that most of the kids, their parents also didn't come from financial backgrounds. My daughter was in 6th grade and she was told by the teacher that she needed to pick a foreign language. And she said, no, I know what I want to take. I want to take Mandarin. Now, the teacher told her she couldn't take Mandarin. And Jenna said, well, why can't I take Mandarin? I want to take Mandarin. And the teacher said, because you have to take Portuguese. And my daughter said, well, why do I have to take Portuguese? And the teacher in front of the entire class said, because you live in Fall River and everyone here speaks Portuguese, people that live here don't leave here. So you need to learn to speak the language. And my daughter, she came home and she was telling me the story and she was really upset. And she's like, Mom, I'm probably going to get in trouble because I kind of went after the teacher today. And I said, well, what did you do? And she said, she told me the story of everything I just said. And then she said, and I stood up to that teacher in front of my entire class. And I said, don't you tell me or anybody else in this room that we're stuck because of where we are. I watch my mother. My mother has nothing, but she's in school and she's going to become a lawyer and she is changing our lives. So don't tell me or anyone else that we're stuck because of where we come from. I watched my mom and she's doing it. So anyone here can do it. And she told me this story. And for me, it was a moment, you hear about people's aha moments. That was my aha moment because up to that point, my journey was to change my kids and my future. In that very story that she told me, I realized my journey is so much bigger than myself. Me accomplishing my goals is going to let other people know that they can also accomplish theirs. And that the fact that my daughter had the guts and the courage to be able to stand up and the knowledge of that's what was happening, where she could stand up for other people who might not have had the courage to say something like that, to me was a game changer. It changed the focus of everything that I wanted to do and really set the trajectory of where I went and how I've built my firm. And to me, seeing that in my daughter was my proudest moment.